Alright, I think everything should be up. So I apologize if my voice is a little softer than normal. I recently had some tooth extractions, wisdom teeth and stuff, so my mouth is still a little bit painful. But I was going to do this yesterday, but I didn't. I had the time, but I was exhausted, so I couldn't really do it. But today we are going to be doing something I was requested to do a Wendigo. Now, I don't know if the person who requested it was thinking of the traditional Wendigo or the, I guess, westernization of it, if that's a thing. I don't know if that's the proper term because Native American's technically in the West, but I guess the European-ish version of it, if that makes sense. But I'm a bit of a stickler for going back to more traditional portrayals. Whenever I read about creatures from mythology and lore, I like to try to find the original descriptions, and I often will pay homage to more modern ones sometimes. Like when I did the Baku ages ago, I didn't do it like a tapir. I did it like the more chimera type creature that it was originally. So in this case, we're going to be doing something similar. We're going to be using the original portrayal of the Wendigo rather than the, I guess, horror media version. So there will not be deer antlers. It is much more corpse-like in its original lore. I would say zombie-like, but the mentality of the Wendigo is not like a mindless zombie. So I've done a little base here. My intent is actually to have a base for him to be on. I do intend to put a deer antler skull on the base here, maybe some bones or something. I may either sculpt or 3D print those, not sure yet. But there will be some base decorations to get the idea of death and famine. But he will not be wearing the deer skull, nor will it be part of his head. The antlered version of the Wendigo was a later invention of some horror type novels. I don't think, because I know one of the original ones that took the idea into horror media was an older book by a man called Algernon Blackwood. I have never read the book. I don't really know much about it, but he did use the Wendigo. However, I think he had a corpse-like version of it, kind of. But he had his own portrayal of it, and then some later people picked it up. I'm not sure at what point the antlered version of the Wendigo started becoming popular. But initially they gave it antlers, and then they gave it an entire deer skull. And if I remember correctly, there's actually a like Western fairy type god being that looks a lot more like the portrayals of the antlered Wendigo than the original Wendigo. So I'm not sure if it was like crossovers from that caused that to happen. But the portrayal of a Wendigo, it's much more corpse-like. The idea is starvation and emaciation. It needs to look like an emaciated body. So we're going to be going for that. And I often like to make things look cutesy. However, there is literally nothing you could possibly make cutesy about a Wendigo. So we're not even going to try. I'm going to do my best to make this as horrifying as it should be. I'm a little worried about my skills, as humanoid figures are not my forte. I know I put that in the description. They're not my strength when it comes to sculpting, but I'm going to do my best. So yes, this one's going to be a slightly more creepy, scary-looking sculpture if I do it correctly. If it is not, then I have not done it correctly. But the Wendigo is very interesting for its lore. It's how shall we say? It can also be seen as a bit of a metaphor in addition to being a lore and a monster. It is very much, now the one side that the modern portrayals of it do get correct and don't lose is the idea of cannibalism. That was very much part of the Wendigo's lore. However, it was not exclusively cannibalism. That was one of the major things, like a social taboo, and it's generally associated with winter and starvation and times when, you know, food was scarce. That's kind of the idea behind the Wendigo. That's why when I did my little thumbnail sketch, I put snow around. We are going to be putting snow on this base. I have a cool technique to make fake snow with glue, and I think I have to look it up. It's either baking powder or baking soda, but you can make really realistic snow that way. So we're going to be decorating, when we do the painting, we're going to be decorating the base with snow and ice. So it's associated with wintertime, ice, starvation, difficult times. And the biggest thing about the Wendigo is kind of the concept of hunger, emaciation, selfishness, greed, to the point of, you know, committing the horrible crime of cannibalizing someone for your own survival. And that's kind of the idea behind the Wendigo. It can almost be seen as a metaphor or a warning for that type of selfish behavior when you're in, especially in like Native American cultures. I think some of the stuff that I was reading pointed out that, you know, in cultures like that, especially, you know, when survival is so dependent on people working together and as a community, selfishness and hurting others would be one of the worst things. I mean, it's always one of the worst things you could do, but especially would be one of the worst things that you could do in situations like that. So this monster kind of epitomizes all of that. So it's very interesting. Now, there's some different portrayals in the exact appearance. When I looked it up, it said that this was a lore, like folklore and part of the religion of the Algonquin-speaking tribes, which there's several that were in that language family of tribes. And some of the legends vary a little bit. The thing they do have in common, the cannibalism, wintertime, hunger, starvation, greed, selfishness, those kinds of things were in common. But a couple of them saw the Wendigo as a giant. And the idea behind that was like every time it consumed another person and had this insatiable desire to keep consuming, that instead of, you know, gaining weight or getting satiated or nutrients from that, it would instead grow in proportion to that and continue to starve because it hasn't satisfied itself, but now it needs more. And some of them portrayed it that way. Some of them said it was a giant. Others, it was more humanoid small. Some's like, oh, it's a giant, or it continues growing. So there's a couple different variations. I'm not going to worry too much about the size thing here. I may make the deer skull a little bit small when I put some skeletons. Like I said, deer skull's not going on its head because that's not accurate. But when I put some skeletons and remains around the base here, I may make them a little smaller. We'll see how that works out. But I'm not too concerned about the exact size, as there aren't other people in this sculpture. This is the base body frame that I've done so far. Now, for features, the idea is typically emaciation. That's the big thing. Emaciation, starvation, and basically a gluttonous or never-ending hunger. Typically for human flesh, but it's got that concept to it. So, it's going to be a very skeletal figure, very corpse-like. I did see a few things mentioning yellow eyes and fangs, so we're going to give him some longer teeth and maybe slightly abnormal human proportions. So that's something we'll do, but ultimately it's supposed to look very corpse-like. So when we paint it, I'm going to have to think and consider how I want to do the skin tones. I'm thinking slightly off-yellowed because unfortunately, I have seen people before they died, and they usually get sort of an unhealthy yellowish pallor to them. So I may go for that. We'll see. We'll see what looks most natural. But, like I said, and then we'll do snow and ice around, because that's another key part of the metaphor, if you will, of the monster. So, alright. And my idea was kind of to have him perched up on like a little rock here that's partially buried in snow. And this can be all lumpy and misshapen because it's going to be covered in snow, so it's all good. And again, I apologize that I'm speaking very softly. My mouth still hurts a bit, so talking's not the most pleasant thing in the world. It's not terrible. It's a lot better. It's getting better, but recovery is very slow. I had 3 wisdom teeth that were impacted and had to be cut out, and then another molar. So it's a little bit uncomfortable. But it's all over now, so I just gotta recover slowly. But yeah, I wasn't able to do. I meant to have a video ready to post last week, but I did not. So But I finished my corgi ahead of time, so I guess it doesn't really matter. Plus, I don't think anyone's dying or waiting for my videos at this point in time, so it really doesn't matter. But I just like to keep a schedule, you know, be consistent, just in case someone is watching. Although I know there typically isn't. Alright, so this is just our base. Alright. So this is, I'm gonna admit, this is gonna be hard for me. I'm not the greatest at humanoid type figures. My idea is to kind of have him arched over, almost animal-like. I'm gonna try to make the arms a little weirdly elongated. We may go for some fangs. I have some eyeballs that I've chosen as well. And I'm going to try to do some scraps of clothing and fabric. But the biggest thing here is just we got to get the skeletal and emaciated body kind of look. That's the main thing. I will say anatomy on a wireframe is somewhat challenging. I almost wished that, you know, sometimes I feel like I should bake almost like this, like I've done with the leg here, and then sculpt on top of it so you have a solid, firm thing to sculpt on. I almost did that with the head, but there wasn't really a good way for me to do that. I didn't have the time, so... But when you're sculpting over a wireframe, the clay tends to want to just mold around it and fall off, which makes it a little bit challenging. I notice a lot of people who do human sculptures do the initial like base shape, just a simple skeletal type shape, and then sculpt more on top of it after they've baked that, so that they have a nice firm base to work with. And that I may have to attempt that a few times, although that does kind of put a damper on how quickly I can sculpt things. It adds more steps. It would be easier if I used a firmer clay, but I like soft clays because firmer clays hurt my hands. Yeah, so I'm not sure at what point in time the idea of deer antlers with the Wendigo came about. Definitely not from Native American culture. It was something to do with later portrayals, and I'm not sure why. I glanced at it a couple times, and I couldn't really see like, oh, this was the first one to portray it that way. There were definitely changes in some of the westernized portrayals, but some of them, I think it started with maybe with antlers at first, and then it changed to the whole like deer skull thing. But yeah, the Wendigo's a bit more than that. I mean, like I was saying, it's a bit more than just the idea of cannibalism. It's more insatiable greed, hunger, and selfishness, as well as the ultimate act of that, if you will, cannibalism. I did see a couple things that said they had like a heart of ice, so I'm not sure if I'm going to try to portray that. We'll see when we get to the chest. I may just make him look very frozen and cold. Death, decay, frozen, corpse-like attributes. Those are like the common things that I saw in all of the more traditional explanations that I found. And the other interesting thing is that they're not mindless, you know, because a lot of Western undead would be very similar in appearance to this. But the Wendigo isn't a mindless creature. It, in several cases, it sometimes talks. Some versions of it try to lure people away intentionally. So they're not mindless creatures. They're just corpse-like monsters, which is slightly more terrifying, you know, because if you see all the stuff with zombies and things or the Western undead, they're usually mindless creatures either being controlled by someone else, or they're just basically mindless. They're driven by nothing other than, you know, hunger. And I always laugh because it seems like in so many zombie movies you could defeat them so easily because they're really dumb. Whereas the Wendigo is slightly more horrifying because it is a sentient being on its own. It doesn't necessarily lose its intelligence, but instead gains a horrible craving and an endless desire for something that it can never satisfy. Which to me makes it scarier. Because you can defeat mindless things pretty easy. It's like trying to outwit, you know, something that's really stupid. It's very easy. My first thought was baby, but that's not the best example for this. Anyway, something that isn't terribly, you know, intelligence that's very easy to fool. Whereas this wouldn't be like that. I have seen one game that physically portrayed them, I think, better. It was one of those weird choice games that somebody was playing called Until Dawn. And they had the wintertime thing going on. But I think they made them mindless and they couldn't see motion or something, which I saw no reason for that. I think that was just for game mechanics. But they did look very corpse-like with fangs, and they looked like the people that they turned into. So I think that portrayal side of it was more accurate, but I'm not sure where they got the rest of it. That game's a bit messed up, but I saw somebody play it, and I was like, huh. But it was more accurate than a lot of the other portrayals I've seen. One of the shows that I like, it's an anime. There's theories about one of the main characters being a Wendigo, but he has the deer antler head look. But he did mention eating humans at some point, so. Yeah. I think that's the portrayal most people are used to seeing. Although I'm not sure how common knowledge it is for people that that's not an accurate portrayal. So I don't know. I'd be curious to see, because like I've known that for a bit, but I like to read about stuff like this, and I'm not sure that everybody does. One of the stories that I saw, I think it's listed on Wikipedia as well as a couple other places, was a similar story about a guy who was like he like started eating himself and almost turned into a skeleton kind of thing and was trying to fatten up this little boy. And it made me think of, it like unlocked this memory of a book I read when I was a child. It was like a kid's horror story, and it was called Skeleton Man. And I remembered, like, I thought the lore was like vaguely Native American inspired. So I had to look it up the other day, and it is. Now, I didn't mention anything like a Wendigo specifically, but it had a lot of similarities. Where this girl gets adopted by a questionable uncle, and he keeps feeding her stuff, and she remembers this story about a guy who slowly ate all of his own skin and then started all the people around him. And I remember it being a good book. I remember liking it when I was a kid. And it stuck with me. But yeah, when I was reading some of the Wendigo stories, I was like, this sounds really similar. Now, it's not listed as the same. So I don't think it is necessarily the same story. I don't know if that was meant to be. But there's some very, very similar elements to that story, which was also inspired by Native American lore. I think the author may have some ties that way. I'm not sure. But I just remember the picture of, it's got like a girl's foot on the front, like in socks, and there's a skeleton grabbing her leg. I just remembered that so vividly as a kid. And I think she has this dream about a rabbit that tells her how to escape, because she rescued it at some point. But it was very interesting, and I remembered that so keenly as a child, that story. Alright. Now I'm gonna have some ragged clothes kind of hanging out the waist here, so if it doesn't look too good, it's okay. Partially because the emaciated hips are kind of hard to sculpt, and also I would like him to be wearing some clothing. And I figure if this, was a person turned into a monster, they would probably still have scraps of their clothing on. They might even be fully clothed. I don't think they were in a couple of the legends that I read, but they might be. Partially or fully. They had a fun time looking that story up because I was like, I remember a story about something like this. So, no, there's another creature that's spelled similar called, I think it's Wachuge or something like that. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. I didn't look it up. It's spelled Wechuge. It has a lot of similarities to the Wendigo, but it's more about social customs and like not following social rules among the community, social taboos, if you will. And that was you would turn into that monster, and it has a lot of similar elements to the Wendigo. But it was less strongly associated with hunger and starvation, although it did have those elements in it. And the cool thing about adding snow is that I can cover up anything that doesn't look too good with snow. And sort of make up for my failings. The thing I really have to get correct is the face and the rib cage here. I know it doesn't look too great right now. It's okay. We will be adding on to this. So we need to do like the tip for the waist here, and then the rib cage should start right about there. Alright. Add more to the rib cage sections here. Alright, so we got a little bit more of the basic shape here. Smooth it out. Okay. And my intent too is to have the feet like partially buried in the snow for two reasons. One, so I don't have to sculpt the feet very detailed, and two, because that would make it look very grounded on its base. So not entirely because I'm lazy or lack the confidence that I can do it well. Partially because it just makes sense that way. All right. I want to get the base done here before we start adding too many small details, because I have a tendency to crush these small details as I work. Okay. I'm gonna do a little bit more of a pronounced hip bone here. I realize the leg attachment to the hip bone's a little weird. It's a little off, but hopefully I can cover that a bit with the ragged clothes we're gonna kind of drape around it. There we go. Alright. Yeah, because then we need like a little bump right here where the leg would attach. Or like the edge of that bone. I should probably pull up a skeleton. If I was smart, I would have done that. Because you have to think about it like draping a thin cloth over a skeleton to make emaciated frames look normal. I mean, I've also seen underweight people before, so similar idea. Okay. But yeah, usually one of the things you can see, like the dip of the hip bones here, and then the stomach is right here. The belly button, right there. And then your stomach kind of ouches here a bit. And then the rib cage is what we start up here. But we also need to have the sternum flat right there. So one of the ways you can tell if you're getting too thin is if you can start seeing your rib cage up near your shoulders and in your chest. Although sometimes it's really hard. I mean, it depends a little on body type, but it's really hard to capture this in sculpture for some reason. And then the shoulder blade needs to be up here. Okay. Okay. So we gotta do, I'm gonna do a line for the spine here real quick just so that I know what I'm attaching to. Mash it in a bit. So shoulder blades should be sticking up here, so we'll have to do those. And then the hips, we need to do that little dimple that's like right here. On, not quite there, it's like right there on the back. I think that's where it is. My brain. Right here. Okay. But yeah, the main goal, again, emaciation, starvation, we gotta make it look like that. So we'll do the other side of the rib cage here. Alright. You can kind of see the shape we're getting here. We're getting there. Alright, we gotta do the shoulder blades. They should stick out pretty sharply. Alright. All right, so this is the back now. We're doing pretty well. Now, sometimes you can see a little bit of ribcage here. Usually there's enough muscle to prevent that, but okay. All right, so we have okay. So I'm going to go ahead, prop it on the base the way that I want for now. Okay, so we're gonna have the back end of the foot here. Heel. No. We're not going to be too detailed with this part because I intend to cover this with snow. I just want his heel to stick up a bit. Okay. Again, I intend to kind of bury the feet a bit in the snow. Some detail angle here. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to do the fragmented bits of cloth. Okay, so we have this so far. Alright, so we're going to do the arms next. Alright. Oh, that was my wrist snapping very loudly. longer for the thumb. All right. So we got one arm done. And I know the arms are somewhat freakishly long. I did that on purpose. Trying to make it look human, but like slightly monstrous. I'm gonna see if I can do claw-like nails on all of these. Alright, so if you can see the hand that I just sculpted. Alright. Now we gotta do the other arm. Now this one, the wire I had to use was a little bendy, so yeah, that might be a problem. But we're gonna work with it. And as you can tell, I'm avoiding doing the head because I'm terrified I'm gonna ruin it. Alright. Let's do the arm. Arms are a little off. That's okay. We will just go with it. Oh no, that's kind of off. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Oh no, it messed up my hand that I did so well. Okay, made that a little bit shorter now so we can fix the lopsidedness of the arms. I need to be more careful when I make my wireframes for these so that that doesn't happen. Stay on there. Alright, so we gotta do the hand. Okay, needs to be a little more clay here. Alright, almost done with the second hand. All right. You can see all right, so now the last and final challenge is we gotta do the head. And this is gonna be the part that I'm scared of and hard. It's gonna be hard for me to do accurately. Okay. Is there enough clay for the head? Yes. Get basic head shape here. All right. Okay. Okay, so eyes need to be here. And they need to be very sunken. These eyes might actually be a little large. I think they were the smallest ones I had, though. So we will cover them up with eyelids pretty well, but first things first. They need to be very in the head, sunken. Okay. Several of the descriptions mentioned lacking lips and having very visible teeth, so... And one of the descriptions mentioned having a long tongue. I only saw that in like one or two, or one actually. I don't think I saw it in two. But I'm gonna give it a slightly beast-like tongue just to add to the monster-ishness of this. But okay. Add details that give it a skeleton-like shape to the head. Okay. We're going to try to do some teeth here. And 2 or 3 mentioned fangs. So we're going to do small-ish fangs on the side here. Okay. I'm going to do a little bit of eyebrows left over on the top here. Just a little bit. Alright, so now we gotta connect these together in a way that looks correct. Now, I don't know if the Wendigo has hair or not. I think I'm going to give it a few little strands. Okay. Alright. So I think we're going to give him... Alright, and we got to do the ears. Okay. Alright. We're almost finished. Alright, I think we're almost done. Alright. Let me do that. So this is a more traditional version of the Wendigo. Yep. I have to fix that a little bit there. Alright. So basically a Wendigo is supposed to be emaciated, have yellowish eyes, look very skeletal-like. Some mentioned teeth and fangs, so we gave him 2 larger teeth. And a slightly longer tongue. I made him a little weirdly proportioned with the super long arms. But we are pretty much finished. And if you're wondering, of course, these back pieces on the feet that I didn't do very detailed, they're going to be covered in snow because we're going to cover this base in snow. I am probably going to do some 3D printed little bits of like deer skeletons and other stuff. But that is our Wendigo for now. I think I actually did okay on the face. I was doubting myself there, but I think I did okay. Anyway, if you watch this video, I greatly appreciate it. If there's something you'd like to see me sculpt, let me know. I will read up on it and see if it's something I think I can have fun doing. But if you watch this video, I hope you enjoyed it. I greatly appreciate any comments or interaction that I get, because my channel is, you've probably noticed if you're here, very small. And I don't really know how to grow YouTube channels. I really suck at that. So I greatly appreciate any interactions. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful night.